Will there be a player on the board at number 24 that's too good for the Dallas Cowboys to pass up? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your
Locked
daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, it is Mock Draft Simulator 4.0. We've done a mock where we've just sat at pick 24 and drafted, I think, the best offensive lineman. We've traded back a couple spots. We've taken offensive linemen with the first two picks. On today's Mock Draft Simulator, we're going to talk about the potential of an elite player falling to the Cowboys and if they can pass up that. Before you begin, Landon, like who would qualify for you as like a, hey, ignore need, take this player at 24?
What's interesting about this exercise is that honestly, when I was thinking about this, like a lot of these names that would come up, and this is probably why we haven't done a bunch of these or seen a bunch of these drafts. A lot of these names that would come up as potential fallers that we would be very interested in, couldn't pass up, they're at positions that we would have been drafting. So there's the possibility of someone like one of these tackles falling, like Mims, I think, or what if there's more to know about Joe Alt or someone like that, like
Latham.
One of these. Yeah, one of those guys just falling. That certainly is a thing that could happen. But I think we haven't really discussed, like, what if an elite player at a position we haven't necessarily targeted, exclusively in the first round fell. I think, Mitchell's a guy that we've talked about before. That was, just a top of the class defensive tackle who could, be a disruptor and a game changer at that position. I think that, there's a couple of different corners that, are up near the top that if they fell that you would at least have to consider. We've talked about, several of these kind of wide receivers that are in tiers. Brian Thomas is kind of in that tier above there, that could potentially fall to the Cowboys that could make this interesting. So I think that there are, what if Brock Bowers fell? I've done a couple of drafts where Bowers fell all the way to 24. I don't think it's very likely. Doesn't seem likely at all. But
no,
CeeDee Lamb falling to the Cowboys didn't seem likely either. So I just thought it would be an interesting kind of exercise to plan for success, plan for, wild success. And what happens if the Cowboys get a gift? Are they going to be able to work around that and kind of draft still what they need while taking this gift that falls to them in the first round?
I'm going to mention one name. You kind of briefly mentioned him. Terrion Arnold, for me, is like the perfect guy. Comes from a Saban defense, would transition really well into Mike Zimmer's defense, has experience in the slot and on the outside. Now, he only ran, I think it was like a 4.50 at the NFL Combine. And maybe that scares teams off inside the top 20 of drafting him. The Cowboys don't really have a need at corner with Jordan Lewis coming back, with DeRon Bland, with Trayvon Diggs. But to me, he's like a top 12 player in this class. That's one. But what about a defensive lineman, Landon? Is there a chance that maybe a defensive lineman falls to the Cowboys at 24? Let's get into our mock draft simulator. So on the board right now, we actually had, a couple surprises. You had Graham Barton go to Jacksonville at 17. You had Kool-Aid McKinstry went to the Colts at 15. Quinyon Mitchell went to the Bengals at 18. Malik Neighbors falls to the Rams at 19. That's a little strange.
Wow.
Patrick Paul,
that almost feels like it could be a trade up situation.
Yeah,
if he fell that far, right?
Patrick Paul, Brian Thomas, Terrion Arnold, Nate Wiggins are the 4 picks ahead of the Cowboys, and that leaves Byron Murphy II, defensive tackle out of Texas, on the board for the Dallas Cowboys, along with Jackson Powers Johnson, Tyler Guyton. You still have Jordan Morgan, Chop Robinson, Darius Robinson, Kingsley. Is this an automatic like run to the podium pick for you?
I don't know. I mean, I think there is a good chance that Murphy falls to the Cowboys at 24. I mean, I think that it certainly is a situation where, if it fell right, defensive tackle is obviously a very specific need. So it certainly could. I certainly would not be shocked. Let's put it that way. If the Cowboys viewed this as a run to the podium scenario, right? Like if they viewed him, hey, he's the best defensive tackle in the class. He may be the best defensive player in the draft. We have such a high grade on him. And honestly, I do think that defense to me is like the kind of silver bullet here that we're talking about, right? Where we've been talking about offense this whole time, wide receiver, tackle, guard, center, whatever. If the Cowboys' top defensive player fell, whether that be Murphy or whether that be like someone like Mitchell or Arnold, like you mentioned, I think that there is a scenario where the Cowboys may look around and say, hey, we know about depth at the tackle and center and running back position. Maybe we take this guy and then we try to see how the rest of the board falls and we see what we can do.
So a couple things. Defensive tackle is a need for the Cowboys. So it's not like they're taking a position that's not a need. Oso Odigizua is a free agent after this year. I don't know if the Cowboys are going to be able to sign him to a big deal, especially with the defensive tackle market going way up and all of the other players they have to sign. And you also could just use all of these guys together. You're going to need multiple defensive tackles. I was actually talking to somebody this morning who would know, and he said, I talked to 2 defensive coordinators. I'm reading a DM right now, and they say that Byron Murphy is the closest thing to Aaron Donald that they've seen in the last 10 years of scouting. Top graded defensive tackle they've had in 8 years.
Yeah, I mean, and look, this is a team that clearly has been not, paying attention to the position very well. They've clearly been, trying to get by with kicking defensive ends inside as a pass rushing situation, cobbling together the run defense with, cheap free agents, getting a guy in the first round, especially a guy who, look, obviously they drafted, Mozzie last year, but even Mozzie was a different type of defensive tackle, right? And even if even if you hit on him, you could still use all these guys at once if you need to. So I think it would make some sense for the Cowboys. I would be upset at all if they took Byron Murphy. I think it would make a ton of sense. You're trying to add players to a defense that is about to have some expensive pieces, so it's good to have good young talent there as well. As much as we obviously need to have holes in the offensive side, you can't just completely dismiss the defense if there's, a chance to kind of take it over the top. And, again, pairing a pass rusher like Byron Murphy inside with the guys that you already have on the outside, I think that could also just really take your defense to another level.
A couple stats on Byron Murphy or athletic stuff: 6'1.5", 297 pounds, the wingspan 77 inches. The reason he could fall, Landon, is because of the size. There's just a lot of teams that aren't that interested in sub 6'1" defensive tackles, but this is why you're interested in him. 11-inch hands, which is huge for a player of that size. 4.87 40-yard dash. Vertical jump was 33 inches. That's in the 88th percentile among defensive tackles. 111 broad jump. He has a RAS of 9.2, despite the size being all on the very small end. He is a disruptive pass rusher. You look at the PFF stable metrics, everything is either in the 98th or 99th percentile when it comes to his pass rushing stuff. We've seen these type of defensive tackles fall a little bit because there are teams that want more size. But for me, he is way too good of a player to pass up at 24.
You don't see players that are it's really basically down to Aaron, Donald and this guy, that you see players that are this type of pass rusher, but also very good against the run. He's also very, very good run defender. So again, no issues at all if the Cowboys find themselves able to draft Byron Murphy if they run up to the podium and take it and then say, hey, we'll figure out the rest as we go. And we're going to show you the exercise of what they'll have to do to kind of fit a player like that in the first round.
All right. So let's discuss the strategy, Layden. If the Cowboys do decide to go, let's say defensive tackle early in first round, how do they address their offensive line need, their linebacker needs, their running back needs on day 2 and day 3? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. That's the winning formula for championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Are you having to turn down the volume because of all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Landon, let's go to round two here. What's on the board for the Cowboys? A couple interesting names. Top, you got your quarterbacks, Bo Nix and Michael Penix, which we're not going to address at all. You've got some wide receivers. Roman Wilson is available. Keon Coleman. Jonathan Brooks, the running back, is there. Edgerrin Cooper, if you're looking for a linebacker. You want to get the Texas defensive tackles, you compare Byron Murphy with Tavondre Sweat. If we go to offensive tackle, because I know that's a problem spot, Blake Fisher is still available. Matt Conclaves, who the Cowboys brought in for a 30 visit, also available. On the interior offensive line, Cedric Van Pan, Cooper Beebe, Bo Lemer. What stands out to you?
Well, it stands out to me is that I feel like we might be in danger zone with our tackle situation, right? Because you look at what's available, and Fisher is really the only guy that I feel super comfortable with, like drafting with the hope of any kind of starting situation for him this season, right? I think Christian Jones is another guy that, obviously we had Vosh on Lombardi on yesterday. He's a big fan of his. I think that Jones probably could, with some time, and maybe you throw him out there and he could be, just take his lumps early and then kind of even out by the end of the season. But I think Fisher is a guy that you can feel good about. My issue is that it feels a little bit early for Fisher here.
I would agree.
But
shout out to John Owning. He thinks that's a lock second round pick.
But. Yeah, well, listen, I don't disagree with the excitement over the player. I would rather kind of try to get a little bit better value if we could. But my issue is that, you look at this and really the only value of the kind of three positions that you're looking at, right? Tackle, guard, or guard center, or whatever you want to look at, and running back. Jonathan Brooks, it makes sense. I mean, you look at there, he's supposed to go right around here. You can easily take Jonathan Brooks right now and then kind of hope for the best there. My concern is that what happens if you get to the next pick and you don't have the tackle that you want?
I agree.
Well, you're going to be in trouble.
I will say, I actually think this is a pretty good situation for the Cowboys because you have all the running backs there, right?
Yeah.
You also have all the linebackers there in this scenario. Edgerrin Cooper, Junior Colson are both still available. Now, Peyton Wilson is gone. But I'm fine if they take Edgerrin Cooper at 56, which leads me to, we have a trade offer. Now, the Bengals want to drop down to 80. That's probably too far to go from 56 to 80. But it is worth noting just to see what the offer probably would be. I'm guessing it would be picks 80, 97, and 115 for 56.
I mean, I would need more than that, right? That's 15 spots. Would
you want to look at like
149? Let's see what they said.
Pick 149. So you get 80, 97, 115, and 149. That would give you picks 80, 87, 97, 115, 149, 174 in the top 5 rounds.
I think that's a nice theoretical, but I think the issue is that, like, I have players where I want to, like, my issue here is that I feel like we only have one option, right? Like, that's not true. I mean, we have the trade option, we have other options, but I'm saying, like, I tend to think the draft has actually fallen well for us here. I just think we have a pretty clear pick here that, like, we're going to have to make, and then, sequence the rest of it accordingly. I think you have to take Blake Fisher here. That's my opinion. I think that you could do a trade back if it was a little bit more of a, like, let's say, I mean, I can't
like the
think of any of those.
66,
like,
or
let's say
something like that?
65. Let's say the Carolina wants to come up or Arizona trades Kyle away, and then they want to come up for, one of these quarterbacks that's still available for some reason. Like, maybe you drop back to 65 or something, but like 80s, I feel like too far, right? Like, especially when you still have starters that you need to draft at some of these positions.
So here's my only issue with doing this. And the positional value is so much better taking a tackle than taking a running back and a linebacker like that. And you know how much I care about positional value. So I'm in agreement there. I just think that Cooper and Brooks are better players, and you are taking for need rather than position, but that's okay. Maybe because you got such a value in round 1, it's okay to take a need at a position that you desperately need right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is which order gives us the most amount of talent, right? Like, if I'm able to get a talented tackle here, a talented running back there, a talented center, that works better than getting a really talented running back, a not so talented tackle, and an okay center. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I feel pretty good about the center options that you'll have in round 3.
I do too. Yeah. That's the only position I feel the same way about running back. I would agree.
Yes.
I think we can make the next, well, honestly, I think if it's up to me at this point, I think what we do is we take Fisher here, we take running back next, and then we take center in the later.
So
I just think center's really going to stretch.
Yeah, we're taking Blake Fisher, who was a right tackle at Notre Dame, but does have experience playing both tackle spots. Wouldn't be surprising at all if that is somebody the Cowboys are targeting. And then
look at that.
Looky here. Now,
look at that. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, guys. It's like,
it is. Now, this is really, really lucky. Oh, no, we don't want Cade Stover. How many Cowboy fans just panicked when I went and looked at a tight end instead of a different position?
Real quick, just so for the podcast listeners, we got to our next pick at 87, and right there staring us in the face is Jonathan Brooks, who made it all the way through that little run. He is still available here at 87 for us to select. So
yeah, and I'll also mention, if you wanted to look at linebackers, Junior Colson is still there. We know the Cowboys are very interested in linebackers, but
we don't have a 4th round pick. That's the problem, right? Like, this would have been like, imagine if we had a 4th round pick here and this happened, because then we would be going nuts, right? Because then you could take Brooks, or you could take Colson here, right? And you could wait until still get Trey Burton maybe in the next round, and then still get a starter, I think, at center. I mean, then suddenly you've done it. Like, you've managed to make it through that kind of gauntlet with all the starters that you needed with good players. So
I just think you took Brooks here. And if you want to, if you want to say it's Trey Benson instead of Brooks, I like Benson better. I think Benson's more likely to be there in the 3rd than obviously.
Benson is who I expected to be picking.
Yes.
Yes.
So let's just say this is, if you think it's totally unreasonable that Jonathan Brooks falls to 87, which I kind of do, and you just say this is starting running back for the Dallas Cowboys that falls to the 3rd round, I think that's very realistic.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know that it's so unrealistic. He's coming off an ACL injury. It's like, it's not very realistic, but it certainly isn't outside the realm of possibility that an ACL injured running back falls to the top of the 3rd round. So, yeah, I mean, I certainly, like, again, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. So I would say let's take him and go.
Yeah, so we're going to take the gift of Trey Benson falling to us here at the 3rd round. But what do we do at center? What do we do at linebacker on day 3? We will get to that next. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are doing Mock Draft Simulator 4.0. You got to say this draft has fallen very nicely for the Dallas Cowboys. Byron Murphy in round 1. You picked up Blake Fisher in round 2 to be hopefully your left tackle in 2024. And then you got your starting running back, Jonathan Brooks / Trey Benson / whoever you want it to be in round 3. We're here at the bottom of round 5, Landon. What position for you is the one that you're going to look at to go attack? Is it center? Is it linebacker?
We're definitely going to look at those two first to see what's there, right? And see what's available. So we're looking at center. We've got Drake Nugent, who is a center from Michigan. We haven't talked a ton about him, but he's part of obviously a very vaunted offensive line for Michigan. Hunter Nuzard, who's a guy we have mentioned before. I liked a little bit of his tape. Haven't seen a ton of him, but what I've seen, I think he could be a starter in the NFL at some point. I don't know Javion Cohen very much.
Neither do I. He's listed as guard, so I wonder how much no center experience.
No center experience. Okay. And then obviously Tanner Bortolini, who look, PFF still has him ranked down here at 212. I just have a really hard time believing he's
212. We are just to be clear though, we are at pick 174. So
yeah. So I wonder if Bortolini actually makes it this far, but to me, he's the obvious pick here just because I think he's valued higher than this.
I think he's a top 100 player in this class.
Yeah, and I think he's an immediate guy that you can plug in and start at center for you. So,
I mean, listen, we're just doing what the draft board tells us, right? Yeah. To me, that's the easy pick. I do want to go to linebacker.
Yeah, we got to look. We have to look.
Yeah, absolutely. JT Bertrand is still there from Notre Dame. You have Steel Chambers.
Yeah,
Tyron Hopper, who I know a lot of people like. Trevin Wallace is here at pick 200 or ranked at 246. It seems like the NFL likes him way more than PFF or I do. I know Dane Brugler has him ranked as linebacker 3. I've got to believe. I know that Jim Nagy really likes him as well. I got to believe that he's probably going to be gone at this spot. But I think the rest of those linebackers are in the range of possibilities at pick 174.
Sure. And actually, looking at this list, I still think there are a couple of these guys that I would be good with, depending on when's our next pick. I'm sorry. We're not doing it. We're not doing it because
it's later. I think it's in the top of the 6th round, but we're not doing that pick.
I honestly think I would take Bortolini here. I just think there is a chance he falls here, but if he does, I think it's a value. So and I think
I take him all day, and he's competing with Brock Hoffman for center. Right.
Yeah.
And that's just what it like. Maybe he's not a day one starter. But we also saw somebody like Tyler Biadasz, who was a more decorated player coming out of Wisconsin, fall to the end of round 4. Bortolini's the better athlete, has not graded out as well. So it's not completely unrealistic, but
I think he's also in a class in which centers are, stuffed to the gills.
How many teams are going to draft centers? Because we've already had Cooper Beebe, Graham Barton, Jackson Powers Johnson, Zach Frazier, Cedric Van Pan, McCormick. Like, you just had a lot of centers already go off the board. So once we get to like center 7, 8, 9, those guys might fall.
And there's several of these guys that are centers only, like Zach Frazier is in top 100, top, two round player without a doubt all day, but he's a center only, So center isn't like guard or tackle where there's 2 of these guys. Like there's only going to be 32 starters at this position in the league. And so even though there's probably 10 starting centers that are coming out of this draft, they're going to be spread out throughout the draft because just not everyone is going to be drafting a center. So,
all right, let's take Tanner Bortolini because we're just following our board, right? We're not reaching. We're just taking the top guys available. I got to say, Landon, if we come out of this draft with Byron Murphy, Blake Fisher, Jonathan Brooks, and Tanner Bortolini, I agree with PFF. That's an A grade.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, seriously, this is what can happen, right? This is why you don't you shouldn't be afraid to kind of allow good situations to fall to you. Again, this is what happened with the Cowboys with CeeDee Lamb too, right? You had your mind set on Trayvon Diggs. You needed a cornerback. You had CeeDee fall to you, and then look what happens. Trayvon fell to you in the next round. So sometimes the draft just falls that way. So when good players fall to you, you have to be prepared. You have to have a plan for how do I make this work? How do I change the sequencing that I had, in my mind going into the draft in order to fit in this elite player that fell to us at our pick in order to continue to kind of just acquire talent? What's, where's my flexibility? Where does the sequencing change? That's kind of what we wanted to explore. And look, I mean, this is a great example of what happens when the draft falls correctly, falls to your benefit. Are you able to find a way to take advantage? You're not going to let it disrupt your draft plan, and still be able to kind of execute what you're trying to execute going into the draft, but also have the flexibility to allow for good things to happen to you, allow for positive spins of the wheel, and being able to take on those players as well as the players you need to draft later on for starters.
We got crushed on YouTube for our last draft. I hope we don't get crushed for this one. This one to me is much, much better. I think this is a significantly better draft. Very happy with it, Landon. 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I think this is my favorite one so far. It's hard to beat, honestly.
The only way that it would have been a little bit better is that if at 56, maybe you had a little bit better offensive lineman, but
maybe.
I don't even know, like, how much better do you like Kingsley than Blake Fisher?
I mean, I think that not too much, honestly. I would say
what about Patrick Paul?
No, I think I like Fisher more than I like Patrick Paul. They're probably, again, I've got to grade all those guys on the same tier, honestly, like middle to late second rounders, basically.
I'm gonna rewatch all those guys this weekend, and then I'll have a firm stance because I kind of feel mixed on all those guys, and I'm gonna include Tyler Guyton in there. I'm gonna do a really deep dive on Tyler Guyton because it does feel like the Cowboys are going to come out of the first two rounds with the tackle. It'll be interesting to see which one they fall in love with.
I agree.
Yeah.
One more thing. There's also that kid from Yale that we've kind of only briefly talked about, but we are seeing his name more and more. He's another guy I'm also going to check out this weekend just to kind of get a better idea on him.
One of the reasons I've been avoiding talking about him is I still have not been able to pronounce his last name. So once I pronounce his last name correctly or somewhat correctly, we'll talk about him more.
You got to go to an Ivy League just to be able to pronounce his name correctly.
Edinburgh University did not give me that kind of education.
No.
All right. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen of the day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. We post videos every single day over there. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier. Have a great weekend, and we will see you right back here on Monday.